I didn't know we had all those. Good to see you. Thank you for being here and for asking me to come. I spent most of my adult life traveling to places where no churches of Christ existed and starting congregations and or helping small churches build up. My wife and I have moved. We've been married 52 years and we moved 16 times. And so, ladies, if you're going to marry a gospel preacher, take that to mind. She didn't know that we were going to be doing that. We go way back with this congregation. Back in the early 80s, I was preaching part-time, was a member at Stanton Church of Christ down in Stanton, Kentucky, and preaching part-time, working secular work. And the brethren there, the elders called me into the office one day, and I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. They called me in, they said, you're going to be a full-time preacher. You don't need to be wasting your time doing anything else. And I said, well, I don't know how to do that. And they said, we're going to raise money, send you to preaching school. And one of the churches that helped me go to preaching school was this one. You guys helped support me while I was at East Tennessee School of Preaching 40 some odd years ago. And so I'll never forget you for that. Do you care how old the earth is? Does it matter how old the earth is? It does, for this reason. The evolutionists have made tremendous headway into our culture. Every single morning that I am home and not traveling, I arise, I fix me a sausage biscuit and a cup of coffee, and I sit down at my desk at home before I go to work and open my computer. And when I do, every morning on Microsoft News, there's a new headline about the age of the earth. Every morning I see a different one. I'm going to share some of them with you in a minute. But it is important. The evolutionists are every place. And they have done their job so well that they have permeated our society to the point that our kids, our children, accept it as fact. They've always been told it. If they've gone to public school, it's just ingrained. And a lot of our young adults are that way. I would like to tell the evolutionists to go home and get out of all this. I'm like the old boy that was sitting in his living room all cozy and watching TV, and it was pouring down the rain, thundering and lightning, and his doorbell rang. And he got up and went to the door and opened the door, and it was his mother-in-law standing out in the rain. He said, don't just stand out there in the rain, go home. That's kind of where I am with the evolutionist. And but they're not going to go away. And so you and I need ammunition. We need to know our Bibles and know how to defend the creation account of the existence of the universe. I want to share a few things with you as we get into the beginning of this. This is a flipper from a sea turtle. It's petrified, and it is on display in the vestibule of the Carriage Drive Church of Christ in Beckley, West Virginia. Beckley, West Virginia, guess where they found this flipper to this turtle? In the roof of a coal mine. They found a whole turtle embedded in the ceiling, in the roof of a deep mine. And some guys broke the flipper off and brought it, and they put it in a case and displayed it. The evolutionist scratches his head at how that got there. I don't have a bit of question about how it got there. Do you? You know how it got there. The earth at one time was covered over up to 15 cubits above the highest mountain with water. Sea turtles live in water. Problem solved. No problem. So how old is the earth and the universe? Well, here are some of the headlines. Scientists have calculated, I love this one. Scientists have calculated the earth to be 4.54 billion years old with an uncertainty of 50 million years on either side. What a margin of error. Did you see that? An uncertainty. We may be off 50 million years, one way or the other. Human bones, I saw this one this morning, human bones in a German cave rewrite history. Ancient aliens, could life be much older than we think? Been discovered. 16,800-year-old cave dwelling discovered. Primitive art found carved into the bone of a bear said to have been done by Neanderthals. And that changes everything they believe about Neanderthals, because they were able to use tools and all that. Well, they were people. That's why there were no Neanderthals. And so these are just some of the things. I like this one. This headline said, limestone stalactites form extremely slowly, usually less than 10 centimeters every 1,000 years. You know what stalactites are? The things hang down from the top of the cave. And radiometric dating has shown some are 190,000 years old. Another one from sciencefocus.com. Stalactites grow at the rate of about 1 cubic inch per 1,000 years. Now, I know that's not a very good picture, but you know what you're looking at? Stalactites growing on the bottom of a wooden bridge. Somebody's wrong, folks. Somebody got their ducks out of a row or whatever it is people say. What does the Bible say about the age of the earth? Well, you take the genealogies in Genesis 5, 10, and 11, and just go through there and count the years. Now, there you might account for some missing generations. The experts, Bible scholars sometimes say, well, this genealogy is different than that one, and this one's a little different than that one, and they were writing to a different audience, and so they didn't include the people that weren't important to that audience, or whatever the case. But put all those together and then count. It's going to be about 2,000 to 3,000 years from creation to Abraham. Then from Abraham to Christ, about 2,000 years. And you know how long it's been since Christ went back to the Father, don't you? About 2,000 years. And so you put all that together, the best you're going to come up with is about 10,000 years old. And that is a stretch. Most creationists, which most of us are, hopefully, most creationists believe that the earth is about 6,000 years old. So everybody, when kids at camp, we have a Bible camp, and Craig and Zach are going to be our directors for high school week this year, and we're really excited about it. But we have a Bible camp, and I've been teaching Bible camp for over 40 years, and taught 8 and 9-year-olds for 9 years. That's why I act like I do. Kids ask me all the time, and my answer is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. That's a safe answer. Is it less than 10? Probably. But it's a whole lot less than 4.5 billion, isn't it? And so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about some ways, some problems with the methods used to arrive at some of the evolutionist dates. The Bible says in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Now, the problem with this to the evolutionists, he says the earth existed for billions of years before people showed up. That says they were there within the first 6 days. That's a contradiction, isn't it? And you're going to see a whole bunch more of these. This is Moses by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. 6 days he made the heavens and the earth. Made the people on day, what day did he make the people? Day 6. So the earth existed 5 days without people, not 5 billion years. And they were coming pretty quickly anyway. Since the creation of the world, Paul said in Romans 1:19 and 20, since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen by the things that were made. Now, the evolutionists will tell you that this earth without form and void and this just big blob gradually evolving into this complicated thing that we call earth and the universe took millions of years. Paul said you could tell that there was a creator by looking at the fantastic, marvelous creation from the very beginning. From the very beginning. The evolutionists will tell you that you evolved from a blob, amoeba, is that the word? And into the complicated creature that you are now. You realize you've got all kinds of complicated systems all running at once. Your circulatory system, your digestive system, your respiratory system, all of those complicated systems are running all at one time. And they do it for years. Johnny Mine's been going for 70 years. 70 years. And it's still going. All of these systems. I've had to have them cut on and fixed a little bit every now and then, but they're still going. And so, clearly seen since the beginning of time. Jesus said the shedding of Abel's blood occurred at the foundation of the world, very near the creation time when you read the Genesis account. So Abel was there. God didn't wait 5 million or 5 billion years to put him on there. God made humans from the beginning of creation. Jesus said in Mark 10 and verse 6, God made humans from the beginning of creation, male and female. And so is the Bible silent about the age of the earth? No. No, it's not. So it's a Bible subject. That makes it important, doesn't it? And it's a subject upon which we are challenged over and over and over again by our culture. And so it is an important subject. Here are some creation verses you know. Colossians 1 and verse 16, talking about God creating everything through Jesus. By him all things were created there in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. John 1 and verses 1 through 3, all things were made through him. Without him nothing was made. I found this one just the other day. I'd forgotten about it and hadn't used it in a long time. Revelation 10 and verse 6. Him who lives forever and ever, Jesus, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the sea and the things that are in it. That doesn't leave anything out, does it? Everything. He created everything. And so we are Bible believers. We are creationists. That puts us at odds. Now, we're tactful and we're diplomatic and we're nice folks, but it puts us at odds with those who tell our children that they are simply, one scientist that I read after pretty regularly says, our children are being told they went from goo to you. From goo to you. And that's what they're being told. And so we need to, and our grandchildren, and so we need to tell them differently. And so we'll kind of get started by talking about the genealogies and all those things. And it's all, we're created. The best you could do, the really liberal, I should go this way with liberal, the really liberal outstretch, stretching it would be 10,000 years. Why does the evolutionist need all that time? Why does he need billions of years? Because he's trying to circumvent God's creation. And the only thing he can say is, it might have happened if it was given enough time. Given enough time. My wife has some jobs at our house, and there are some jobs that I hate to do. There are some things I like to do. There are some husband jobs that I don't like to do. But she holds out hope that one of these days they'll get done. The evolutionist holds out hope that one of these days it's all going to fall into place, and we're going to see that with enough time, the hinge on the cellar door gets fixed. With enough time, you evolve into this magnificent creature. I went the wrong way then. Well, here's one place where they challenge us. They challenge us in a couple of places, but even some of our brethren buy into some of these things. One of the ones, I don't have it up there, but go back to Genesis 1:1, and it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. Some of our brethren, and many so-called theistic evolutionists, say, well, right there's your billions of years. Verses 1 and 2. There's your billions of years. During that time that the earth was without form and void, before the 24-hour days started, there's your billions of years. The Bible doesn't even lean toward that. He's hovering over the face of the deep, and the same day that we are introduced to this without form and void, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And He saw the light was good, and He divided the light from darkness and called the light day and the darkness night. And the evening and morning were the first day, 24-hour day. And we'll talk some more about that. So there's one place where they put their billions of years. While the earth was without form and void, they say, well, now that could have been a period of time over billions of years. The second place they put it is, Peter said in 2 Peter 3 and verse 8, that with the Lord a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Aha! Maybe those weren't 24-hour days as we know them. Maybe, the evolutionist says, they were billions and billions of years. Each day maybe so many million or so many billion years. Can we prove that they were 24-hour days? Well, yes, we can, because the word used, the Hebrew word yom, Y-O-M in English, used always or almost always meant 24-hour day. Or sometimes it means the 12 hours of sunlight in the day. One of those two. Now you and I use words that have multiple meanings. English is really bad for this. I spent time in Malaysia and Singapore and China and Japan in mission work, and English is a tough language for people because we have one word for love. The same word for I love my dog and I love my guitar is I love my wife. It's the same word. Now, it doesn't mean the same thing in English, does it? But, and all three of those things are different kinds of love. But English is tough, and we have words that mean several different things. Let me give you a sentence. Sound like Ernest T. Bass, my sentence. In my day, we went to the store during the day, and we didn't wait 3 days to get it done. Now, I use the word day 3 different ways. Did you have any problem understanding it? In my day, what's that mean? Back when I was a boy. Back when I was growing up. We went to the store during the day. What's that mean? Yeah, wasn't dark. Wasn't dark. And then it didn't take us 3 days to get it done. 3 24-hour days. See, you do that all the time. And so the context of Genesis 1, when you start talking about day, is there are contextual clues. What are they? Well, one of them is they're modified by numbers. The evening and the morning were day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on. So you don't have any problem understanding that those were 24-hour days unless you're an evolutionist and you need billions and billions of years. If you need that, then you try to figure out some place to put it. And you put it in those days, 24-hour days. Modified with numbers, modified by saying evening and morning. And so we don't have a problem with that unless we have a dishonest agenda and are trying to prove something other than what the text says. Now, he could have used the word door instead of the word yom. Door does mean a long period of time, but that's not what he used. If I want to tell you something that happened years ago, I'm not going to use the word day, am I? I'm going to use the word years. And that's what he could have done and would have done. And so Moses says, in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them, and rested on the 7th day. Another clue that he's talking about 24-hour days. Did the Jews have any problem understanding, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy? Did they equate that with the creation week, with the model of the creation week? Well, yeah, because they said, the Lord worked 6 days and rested on the seventh when He created the world. And when they start keeping the Sabbath, do they keep it millions and millions of years apart? Of course not. That's silly. They kept it every Saturday, every seventh day of every week. Literal week, literal day. Now see, that didn't hurt a bit, did it? I'm going to tell you, it took me a long time to put all that together, though. Do evolutionary dating methods prove an old Earth? Let's look at some of their dating methods. Radiometric dating methods. On the point of the age of the Earth, we disagree sharply sometimes. Scientists have proposed a number of age dating methods. But some of these dating methods point toward a young Earth. They don't use those much. They don't say much about those. But they pick the few that could maybe possibly point toward an older Earth. But they're full of flaws. They're full of holes. There is carbon-14, you've heard of that, uranium-238, thorium-232, and potassium-40. And it's important to understand that most of the strata, you know, the layers in the earth that they put so much stock in. How many of y'all worked in the mines when they were really going good? I know this is coal mining country. Did you ever see a tree growing up through several layers of strata? Wonder how that happened. If it takes, I'm going to challenge you. If it takes 1,000,000 years for a strata to form, how in the world did a tree stretch through 10 million of them? Can't be. Can't be. And so these strata dating things are crazy, man. They don't work. They don't compute. Ask a coal miner, he'll tell you. And ask those up in Virginia that found a turtle in a coal mine. They'll tell you, there's something fishy here. Something didn't happen the way the evolutionists said it did. Carbon-14, let's talk about it. Carbon-14 dating method can be only used to date organic materials, things which were once alive. It's not used to date rocks. It has to date, the inventor of it was Dr. Willard Libby, and he's an evolutionist. And here's how it works. Carbon-12 is a carbon that's common and natural in stable form. Where it comes from is it's not radioactive. All living things depend on carbon-12 for survival. Plants get it from carbon dioxide in the air, and then when animals eat the plants, they get it through the carbohydrates that are produced. And carbon-14, though, is much rarer. It only happens when cosmic rays strike the Earth's atmosphere. And so it is radioactive. So you got carbon-12 is not radioactive. Carbon-14 is. To boil it down, and I don't understand it completely because I'm not a scientist, but the way they determine the age of an object that has deceased, and they find it in the ground someplace, is they measure the difference between the carbon-14 and the carbon-12. The carbon-14 disappears over a period of years, and so it couldn't possibly measure anything millions of years old. 30,000 to 100,000 is about the best you could get from that method. Carbon-14 is useful for archaeological work if you're careful not to misuse it. Creationists, dating experts strongly stress that the cataclysm of Noah's day, the great worldwide flood, must be taken into account to properly calibrate the carbon-14 methods. And the evolutionist doesn't take that into account. How many of you have ever been to the Creation Museum? up in northern Kentucky. Need to go. I've got 4 passes, 4 adult lifetime passes. You just stop by my office in Mount Sterling on your way up, and I'll give them to you. And you can go as many times as you want. I gave them $1,000 when they was getting ready to build the thing. They needed money, and I gave them $1,000, and they gave me 4 lifetime passes, and I bet you I've used $20,000 worth on it because I give them to people all the time and say, go, go. Well, when you get up there, you'll see this big dead dinosaur of a looking thing. And you see this animatronic, is that the word? Looks like a human, but it's not. You'll see this animatronic paleontologist digging around and talking in that thing, and he says, now I start from a creationist view, and I believe this thing was buried and petrified in Noah's great flood, suddenly buried. That's why animals didn't eat it and it didn't rot, because the sediment fell on it all of a sudden. And then you have this other little animatronic paleontologist working with him, and he says, I believe this thing died, and a local flood covered it up before the animals could eat it, and it's been laying here untouched for 1 billion years. What's the difference between those two, besides one of them being nuts and the other one being sensible? What's the difference between those two? Where you start from. Where you start from matters and determines where you end up. And so carbon-14, that's what it's used to determine the age of an item, a being, something that was alive. Plant, they use it on wood, they use it on cloth, and things like that. Other methods are the uranium is the same way, thorium and potassium the same way. They measure them, but they can do that in rocks and things that were never alive. And they just measure how much of it's left, and they guess about how much of it was there at the beginning. And they determine the age by how much is left. Now, they won't tell you it's a guess. They'll tell you that they know what they're talking about. Okay, assumptions. Somebody's going to tell me when I quit for the break, right? Assumptions. Assumption number 1 in all these dating methods of the evolutionists is that no daughter element existed at the beginning. By daughter element, we mean something other than the item itself. If you're examining a mineral, a rock, and you are going to determine its age by how much lead is left in it. Lead escapes. How much lead is left in it, and then you say, well, if it had this much at the beginning and it's got this much now, then it must be this old. The only problem with that is you can't determine how much it had at the beginning. You don't know if it had any. And if this came in from the outside, it may have been affected, another assumption, it may have been affected by outside forces. You know something that can change the age of a mineral? Groundwater. Groundwater can leach in and change the test by thousands of years. And they assume that no water has gotten to it. It's been lying there for 5 billion years, and groundwater never ran over it and changed it. It's been lying there all these years, and nothing has changed. And the third assumption is the best. They go on the assumption, when they're dating these things, they go on the assumption that the decay rate has been the exact same for all these billions of years. If it's losing 0.9% per day 5 billion years ago, they say it's done that all the way through. All the way through. Can you imagine the variables in that? How many things could happen to change that rate? I used to, when I had time, gather up old rusty lawnmowers and garden tillers, and mostly pile them up in my may use pile. But the idea was shine them up and fix them up and give them to people that needed them. I've done that with a lot of things. I got this old tiller that was made up it's a rear tine tiller from the 70s. made up in Ohio. It's called a rotahole. They haven't made them for years. It's green, the ugliest thing. And so I got it, and one of the handlebars, tillers have big handlebars. Hang on, this will make sense. One of the handlebars is perfectly shiny and strong as it can be. And the other one is rusty and just flops. It's been broken. I haven't figured out how I'm going to fix it yet, but I will. Now, how come one survived and the other didn't? Well, I asked the guy I got it from. He said, well, that side, the strong side, was sitting under the eave of the barn. And the other side was out in the elements. It's been raining on it for 30 years, 40 years. And so the handle rusted in too. So the elements can change the date. That's my point. Was that a good illustration? Did that make sense? Okay. Assumptions. Now, what does all this tell us about the dating method of the evolution? And I know some guys that are evolutionists that I drink coffee with, and we argue all the time. We like each other. They're not bad guys. They just have a hard time believing that a creator spoke all of this into existence. I don't have a problem with that, do you? I don't have a problem believing that. Here's why. I look at something made and I know somebody made it. I have never seen anything fall into place. And so, you look at the creation, there must be a creator. But not everybody sees that. This is a evolutionist scientist who says, it's obvious that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating method that they're claimed to be. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are often quite different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. Well, we saw one earlier that said he had a 50 million year variable. There is no absolutely reliable long-term radiological clock. Now, this is one of those that said this. And so I'm not going to put much stock in those dating methods. They cannot prove an old earth. But are there scientific methods for a new earth? Somebody's going to tell me when to quit. Got 5 minutes? This is a really good place to stop. Can we stop now? Okay, let's stop now and come back and talk about this later. 15-minute break.
check.
talked about some of the fallacies of the old earth tests, way to test things and determine that they're billions of years old. We pointed out some of the problems with that. In this session, we're going to talk about scientific evidences of a young earth, not just Bible. We did point out Bible evidence, the genealogies. You can't get more than, at a good stretch, maybe 10,000 years out of those genealogies in the Bible when you count them up. But there are scientific methods that point out or show that the possibility of a young earth. First of all, there is the magnetic field. You ever seen a compass? You ever used a compass? Which way does it point? Why? Because there's a magnetic pull at the poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. And so scientists have taken that and realized that, like all forces of nature, the energy of this magnetic field is decaying, decreasing in strength, due in part to the second law of thermodynamics, if you remember that from high school. The strength has dropped 6% since 1835. The magnetic field of the Earth is 6% weaker than it was in 1835. And so Dr. Thomas Barnes, former research scientist at Duke University, took that and determined that the half-life of the magnetic field is 830 to 1,400 years. Now, what that means is 830 to 1,400 years ago, the magnetic field would have been twice as strong as it is now. Now, how does that help you? 830 to 1,400 years before that, it would have been 4 times as strong. And so you start there and go forward, and you realize that go backwards, if you went back 10,000 years, the Earth's magnetic field would be as strong as the sun. If you go back billions of years, it would be stronger than the sun, and that would get everything out of kilter. And there's never been a time on Earth when the magnetic field was stronger than the sun, and so it couldn't be more than 10,000 years. Now, you go back and research that, Google it, Google the magnetic field, and you'll understand it a lot better than the way I describe it. Helium is another big one. I learned this in grade school, this helium thing. Former Nobel Prize nominee Dr. Melvin Cook studied the Earth's natural helium supplies extensively. Eventually, he became convinced that the reason there is so little helium gas in the atmosphere is because the planet is relatively young and hadn't had time to produce a great amount. Uranium and thorium deposits throughout the world are steadily producing helium. More helium enters our atmosphere from the sun and from leaking from the Earth's core through the crust. And so if the Earth was actually billions of years old, the atmosphere should contain a large amount of helium, up to 1 million times more than it is. And so the question is, where's the helium? Well, the fact is the Earth's not billions of years old, and that explains it. The Earth is only about 10,000 years old. I usually, when I get smudges on my glasses, I clean them on my tie, but I don't have a tie today. My wife told me, she watched a film of me preaching, and she said, you cleaned your glasses on your tie 4 times. So the very little helium can escape into space. And so based on Dr. Cook and other physicists, they believe the atmospheric helium indicates the Earth is no more, they said, 10 to 15,000 years. That's still better than 5 billion, though, isn't it? And helium. Population growth is the big one. We all learned this in high school, at church when we were in high school. Population growth. How many people in the world right now? 8 billion? Is that right? About 8 billion? How many would be if the Earth were millions of years old? Let's look at that for a minute. The studies have produced information that's interpreted as a young earth. If people have been living for millions of years or more, why has there been no global overpopulation before now? That's the question. The average world population growth over the centuries, average it out, is 2%. But let's give them a break. Let's say it's only grown by 0.5%. 0.5%. If the world is 4,000 to 6,000 years old, the population, beginning from a single couple, you know who they were? Not Adam and Eve. Everybody drowned after that. Noah and his wife and their sons and their wives. Starting then and going forth 4,000 to 6,000 years would be about 8 billion people at a 0.5% growth. If it were millions of years, the population would be trillions and trillions more than what are on the earth now. We're crowded enough with 8 billion, aren't we? We sure don't need trillions. And so it couldn't possibly have been a million years old if the population has increased by 0.5% every year since that. So if man's only been on earth 6,000 to 10,000 years, the population would be more in line with the 8 billion people. There are short-term comets, short-period comets. My grandson, 15-year-old grandson, he and I love stuff like this. We're nerds when it comes to this kind of stuff. But short-period comets. There is the formation of new comets has never been observed. Therefore, whatever was there from the beginning. And they burn out. They disappear. And so if evolutionists are correct about the age of the solar system, one might ask, why are there still comets out there? Why have they not all burned out? Because there's no evidence that their new ones are being formed. Scientists believe the comets came into existence at the same time as the solar system, and the formation of new ones has never been observed, so over a period of millions of years, they would all be gone. And then there's the escaping moon. The moon gets a little further from the earth all the time. Very minute, very little, due to various factors, including tidal friction. And this is from Apologetics Press. I didn't know all this. Earth's rotational speed is constantly slowing, and that provides evidence to limit the age of the moon to 80% less than the evolutionists say. Here's what it means. The slowing Earth transfers energy to the moon. The result is a yearly increase in the distance between the Earth and the moon. A yearly increase. The moon's getting farther and farther away. So if it's this minute increase, and we've been here for millions of years, it would be logical to say that at one time the moon touched the earth. And we know that can't work. And so it could not possibly have ever been that close. Could not possibly have ever been. You just put that theory in reverse and it couldn't work. And so the escaping moon shows us that it's a young earth. The shrinking sun. The more, due to its self-consumption, the sun is smaller than it was in the beginning. If the earth was 1 million years old, the sun would have been at one time too large, too close, and too hot for life to exist. For over 90% of the time the evolutionist says the earth existed, people couldn't have lived on it because the sun would have been too hot, too close. You've all heard that illustration. My grandson made a talk at Church Leadership Instructional Camp last week, and one of his illustrations was the sun is placed perfectly where it needs to be. If it comes any closer, we burn up. If it goes any farther away, we freeze to death. And so there was never a time that it was so big that it would have burned us up, and so that theory doesn't hold. I was telling somebody a while ago about the meteorites. This one's kind of fascinating. You hear about meteorites falling all the time, don't you? Middlesboro, Kentucky is built in a crater caused by a big meteor or meteorite or whatever. And the whole town is built in this humongous crater. And so meteorites fall all the time. Well, here's a thought for you. Back to the coal mine guy in the tree. If those strata take thousands of years to form, you would find some meteorite fragments in them, wouldn't you? Because meteorites fall to Earth all the time. You can find them right now. You know what's missing from most of that strata? There's almost no trace of meteorites. What's that tell you? The strata fell quickly. The strata formed quickly within a year, Noah's flood. And so creationists, don't be ashamed of what you believe. It makes sense. It makes a lot more sense than the other. When they dig through these strata, they find almost no meteorite fragments. And yet you can look on the surface of the earth and find them all over the place if you know what you're looking for. My wife and my other grandson, they love rocks. We have a little old, I would tell you we have a place on the lake, but we have a 1-acre wooded lot and a 1970s house trailer on Lake Cumberland. It's not a condo on the lake. It's very modest. And we go down there, and what they spend their time doing is walking around picking up rocks. And they find little fragments of meteorites all the time. And you can shake them sometimes and hear, if you can hear. My wife will shake it and she'll say, listen to this. No, I don't hear nothing. But if indeed, you get it, if indeed it took years and years to lay all that down, there would be some trace of it. And then I used to talk about this one when I was a young preacher, space dust. Due to the breakup of comets, meteors, and meteorites, interplanetary space dust is deposited regularly on the Earth, the Moon, and the Mars. You remember, how many of you were alive in 1969 in June when they landed on the Moon the first time? I was alive. I was 15. You remember what that thing that they landed in looked like? You remember what the feet looked like? Am I the only one that noticed this? The feet were big, round discs. And the reason they made them that way is they anticipated 50 to 150 feet deep of space dust. Because they said the Earth's a million years old, billions of years old, and meteorites and all those things deposit dust on the Earth and Mars and the Moon. Nobody has ever disturbed it on the Moon, so it must be when you step out of the spaceship, you're going to sink in dust over your head. When they stepped out of the spaceship, what did they do? It was about this deep. It was about this deep. They spent all that money making those big feet on that landing module. Why was it about that deep? Because it's only been there about 6,000 to 10,000 years, that's why. And so that's a really good one, space dust. Scientists don't talk about it a lot anymore, but I have a lot more fun with it than they do. Old age calculations of the evolutionists are much more susceptible to errors than the creationist method. You know our main method? Our main method? What's your main method for determining the age of the earth? The Bible. You know what it is? It is inspired, infallible, inerrant, indestructible. I'm going to rely on that more than carbon-14 and space dust and all that stuff. The evolutionists even admit a margin of error up to 50 million years. Now, I can get a guy saying, I used this thing 4 or 5 times. I'm not sure. But if he tells me, this is how many times this has been started or this has been done, within give or take 50 million years or 50 million times, I'm going to wonder about it. If evolution is simply an effort to explain the existence of God, the existence of the earth and the universe without God. That's all it is. They're just trying to get around God. And they think with millions and millions of years, they can get around God. Now, why do they want around God? If there is a God, we are responsible. If there is a God, we are accountable. If there is a God, I don't get to do just whatever I want to. I don't get to live any kind of alternative lifestyle that I wish to. If there is a God, He calls the shots. Since there is a God, He calls the shots. He makes the rule. Somebody going to hold up their hand when I have to quit? Please don't let me go on and on. The evolutionist believes that he can do this given enough time, i.e. billions of years. Again, Creation Museum. You go up to the Creation Museum and there's a program that you go in and see. It's called Men in White. It's supposedly two angels talking, Michael and Gabriel, talking. And they're talking about this very thing. And their catchphrase is billions and billions of years. And they go on and on about the evolutionist says this, the evolutionist says that, but he always has to have billions and billions of years. Now, here's an interesting thing. I used this as an invitation at Rolling Hills a while back as I was preparing this class. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 8 says, "Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day." Do you realize that you lose between 30,000 and 40,000 skin cells every day? Think about that. Every hour. So times 24 hours, 720,000 skin cells a day. You lose. You know where the dust in your house comes from? Skin cells. Just about all of it. Now it comes from other places. If you live on a gravel road and got your windows up, you're going to get some. But most of it comes from skin cells. What did Paul say? Outward man is perishing. I like this one. Let me read this one to you. Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 1 through 7. "Remember your Creator while you're still young." This is from a modern English translation, not King James. I don't have anything wrong with the King James. My mom and grandmother are in heaven because of it. But so remember your Creator while you're still young, before those dismal days and years come when you say, "I don't enjoy life." That is, when the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars will grow dim for you. The rain clouds will never pass away. Your arms that have protected you will tremble. Your legs, now strong, will grow weak. Your teeth will be too few to chew your food. Your eyes too dim to see clearly. Your ears will be deaf to the noise in the street. That's why you wear these things. And you will barely be able to hear the meal as it grinds or music as it plays. Even the song of a bird will wake you from your sleep. You'll be afraid of high places. Just walking will be dangerous. Anybody in here relate? Just walking will be dangerous. Your hair will turn white. You will hardly be able to drag yourself along. Passion and desire will be gone. We're going to our final resting place, and then there will be mourning in the streets. The silver chain will snap, the golden lamp will fall and break, the rope at the well will break, and the water jar will be shattered. Our bodies will return to the dust of the earth. The breath of life will go back to God who gave it to us. But 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verses 8 through 17, we read about the man perishing. Look at this. Paul said, "We're troubled but not crushed, in doubt but not in despair. We have many enemies, but we're never without a friend. Badly hurt at times but not destroyed. At all times we carry in our mortal bodies the death of Jesus, so that His life also may be seen in our bodies. Throughout our lives we're always in danger of death for Jesus' sake, in order that His life may be seen in our mortal body. For this reason, we never become discouraged. Even though our physical being is gradually decaying, yet our spiritual being is being renewed day by day." 720,000 skin cells. I step on the scales and I can't tell it. I don't know where it went. But life's not scary for the Christian. Don't be afraid. Every day, you're one step closer to heaven, one breath closer to the last one step toward heaven, and you advance the journey a little more. Every kind word spoken and heard makes the trip a little better. Every sin cleansed by the blood of Jesus gets you closer to living in heaven forever. Every Christian can say that he or she is being renewed spiritually, day by day. Even a non-Christian. A non-Christian can say, without a doubt, that he or she is not only perishing outwardly, but spiritually as well. What a sad, sad thing that is.